Hi everyone, welcome back to the Harbinger China Tech Podcast. Today we have joining us William Bao Bean, who is a partner at SOSV, a $250 million accelerator-focused venture capital fund, and a Managing Director of Chinaccelerator, China's first startup accelerator, as well as MOX, the mobile-only accelerator. William has spent the past 2 decades in Asia and China, so he has a breadth of experience that covers not only the rise of the original Chinese tech giants, including Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, but also some of the secondary players and the hottest trends in investment from O2O, online to offline, to entertainment, to the sharing economy, to social commerce, and more. So on today's podcast, we'll cover all of these major trends, as well as William's investment experience with Chinaccelerator, and a focus on companies coming from abroad entering China, as well as Chinese teams and Chinese companies going abroad. Hope you guys enjoy. Hey William, thanks so much for joining us today. So there's a lot of different topics we can touch on today, including your experience at Chinaccelerator, some of your investments, and other trends. But before we get to that, given that you spent 20 years in China, in Asia, why don't we start with some of your overall views on some of the major trends that happened since then?
Sure. So you can look at China Internet in 3 phases. The first phase was early companies, Sina, Sohu, NetEase, to some extent Baidu, and Tencent. And they came along and they were the pioneers. And the CEOs, the leadership of those companies, they're still, for the most part, leading those companies. And they solved very basic problems: search, commerce, games, news. The second phase came with a second generation of entrepreneurs filling in the gaps. So, if you have health insurance, what kind of services go around that health insurance? If you need to travel somewhere, how do you go travel? How do you book your travel? And the second generation grew up in the context of the first generation. What happened was, for the most part, the first generation tried to kill the second generation companies, either kill them or buy them or undermine them. The third generation came in, and most of the companies are social because that's what VCs have been funding. But the third generation has learned from the lessons of the second generation that they need to be differentiated. And it's no longer just enough to be the first one in the market and faster and the first to raise capital, because the big guys, Baidu to some extent, but mostly Tencent and Alibaba and also Xiaomi, these companies dominate almost every single sector. And for the first time, you're seeing China, especially on the VC side, investing in hardcore tech. Not just first mover advantage and the player with the most users, because hardcore tech is becoming more and more important to differentiate in a market where there's such keen competition from the BAT plus Xiaomi.
Right. So thanks for that, William. And we'll get to the hardcore tech in a little bit. You bring up, first of all, the different phases of types of companies, but just exploring a little bit further these different areas that they play in. So again, frontier technology is a big one these days. But over the past 5 years in particular, there's a rise of mobile, O2O, online to offline. There's entertainment, with live video and short video. There's social commerce, which is something that Chinaccelerator does quite a bit in. There's sharing economy these days. So when it comes to these hot areas, or so-called funko, can you talk a little bit more about, from Chinaccelerator's perspective and your own investing experience, what are some of the areas that you focus on and why?
So I think entrepreneurs and to a great extent the VCs that fund them are a lot like sheep. They go into the hot area. So every year there's usually a hot area. Back in the day we had video. Video is a hot area. More recently it's streaming video. But there's many video companies, Youku, Tudo, most of the other ones are all dead. But iQIYI came in later. But these video companies battled it out, and the idea is that there would be 1 or 2 winners. With the phase 2, or the second generation companies, as the Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent started to acquire, for VCs there was an opportunity to invest in. You didn't have to be the number 1 player. You could be number 2, 3, 4, because maybe one company would go IPO and the other 2 or 3 would get acquired by Baidu, Tencent, and Alibaba. Now the opportunity has sort of moved on because just about every single sector has strong players in it. You have a friend was telling me today. You have heavy operations and light operations. An internet company is light operations. The opportunity moved to heavy operations, online to offline, because this is an area that was tougher for the Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent to dominate, because they have an internet background, a kind of a light operations background. But when you go offline, when you're dealing with delivery, when you're dealing with cars, it's a different skill set. What we've seen more recently is, in order to get into those heavy operations areas, the BAT has been acquisitive. So they take large strategic stakes, or they outright acquire the leading startups in China. And so what's the next opportunity? A lot of the VCs are hot on AR, VR. They're looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning. These are technologies. They're awesome tools. But in the end, a startup needs to solve a specific problem. So for Chinaccelerator, we focus on solving problems. We leverage technology to solve those problems. But I'll give you an example. So you've got VR and AR, and you had a VR AR guest from Alibaba on recently, and unfortunately I didn't catch it. But if you look at the 2 major areas where companies can make money, it's entertainment and commerce. There's been a huge focus on VR, AR for entertainment. Where Chinaccelerator's focus is commerce, and we're using AR and VR as a tool to solve a problem, which is selling stuff. People have been trying to sell stuff for the last 2,000 years, and technology has made selling stuff a lot easier, a lot more effective. We started out with text, in the old Mad Men days, the advertising days, and then we got pictures. They were black and white, and then color. More recently, we got video and television. And we're using VR and AR as a medium to tell stories in order to sell product. And amazingly, we proved it out. So we were sending gift boxes with a VR cardboard, something you can pop your phone into, put on your face, and get a not a great, but an okay VR experience. With a group of products, and people were gifting these boxes full of products. The recipients never saw the products before. It was a present, and usually when you get a present, you don't order more of what's in the box. But we got a 30% follow-on order rate. So people who didn't buy the box, didn't want the box, got it as a gift, didn't know how much the stuff cost, and these were not cheap products. Would pop on the VR, experience the story behind the product, and then 30% of them bought more of one of the products. So we based that sort of MVP, minimum viable product, that test, and now that company is going to the next level in terms of using a technology to solve a problem.
Got it. Yeah, that's a really good example. Just to clarify, you're not saying they use the VR and they're able to buy something virtually and have it delivered. You mean via the really immersive VR experience, they are more inclined to buy more products because they have a better experience overall?
Sure. So if you got a box of biscuits, and a box of crackers, like cookies, and it's 100 renminbi box of cookies, $14 for a box of cookies. That's a very expensive box of cookies. Now, people in China are very concerned about where their food comes from, where their cookies come from, but I don't care how worried you are about poison. $14 for a box of cookies is a lot of money. So one of the great things that you can do with video or text and pictures is you can say, here's where the cookies come from. This is the family in Italy that started the bakery in a small city with local artisanal producers who make these cookies. But what you can do with VR is you can be inside the bakery, you can meet the cookie maker, you can go to the lavender fields where the bees go to collect the pollen to make the honey that flavors the cookies. So you can have a personal relationship with the brand, with the product, with the place where that product comes from. And that's very important to China, Chinese consumers. And that's so yes, you can go inside a virtual world and press and buy a box of cookies, but the most important thing is not so much having a new medium in which to push a button and buy. It's more a new medium in which to get educated, to learn about that particular product.
Right. Yep, that makes sense, William. But just curious, because when we talk about commerce, it's very linked to the hip with payments. And everyone knows about WeChat these days, or Alipay. We don't need to explain what that is. But given that in China, you have this ability to buy stuff so easily on your phones, can you talk about how that might impact the overall commerce and immersive commerce, social commerce space? And could you compare that to the US, for example, where you don't really have the payments linked on everyone's mobile phones, so you can't really shorten the sales funnel nearly as much?
Sure. So, I mean, I've been saying that the U.S., companies like Facebook have been behind China for a year and a half to 2 years now. And it's taken about a year and a half for Facebook to develop a lot of the features that are currently coming out in Messenger and WhatsApp around payment and around commerce. And so here's the difference. In China, you can go into any social network, and pretty much anything that you see, you can click and buy. Whereas on Facebook, on Messenger, on WhatsApp, on any of these platforms, they have a different business model, or they actually do not have a business model. They're not making any money. So Facebook is, took the long game. They're making lots of money now, but it's all advertising based. And if you think about basic economics, advertising drives a behavior. And usually people want to drive a purchase behavior. So the advertising revenue is a subset of the actual commerce revenue. So advertising drives game revenue, advertising drives commerce revenue. Facebook makes money on advertising. Platforms in Asia and China, like WeChat and Weibo, they make money on commerce. So they get a cut of the actual purchase. So if you control the payment platform plus the user, it's much more powerful than just controlling the advertising. You can potentially have an order of magnitude greater revenue. So we will see a interesting battle play out in other countries like India, where Facebook and WhatsApp are strong, and where the Chinese players have backed local commerce companies and local payment companies. So it'll be the Indians backed by the Chinese against Facebook and Amazon. And that'll be interesting to play out. But in China, people don't carry wallets anymore. Retail is under a huge amount of pressure because people don't buy offline anymore. And so if you want to look at a future, and you're in the U.S., you can come to China and see how some people will live their lives in the future around the world. China is one way that things will play out.
Got it, William. So, and on that point, given that Facebook's entering a new market like India, and there's other Chinese-backed providers that have payments, attached to the experiences and social. How do you think Facebook might localize their products or customize in those particular markets in corporate payments?
Yeah. So the issue is that Facebook does not localize. They have one size fits all. So Facebook in the U.S. is the same as Facebook in India. Now they can add features, so they are adding payments. But the bottom line is that a product that's designed for one market does not always work in another market. And so far, Facebook has been very successful in Southeast Asia and with WhatsApp. But they are somewhat bounded by the fact that they do not localize. So what you will see, I believe, play out is global companies like Facebook and Google increasingly running up against local players backed by Chinese, Alibaba and Tencent. And so think about it like the next World War. It's not going to be fought with tanks and bullets and guns. It's going to be fought between global companies. And so instead of having 80% of the money made by 20% of the companies, it's 99% of the money being made by 1% of the companies. And so as an early stage VC and an early stage investor working with startups, where does that leave us? So one of the things that we're trying to do, especially outside of China, with our MOX platform, MOX stands for Mobile Only Accelerator, and we growth hack VC by running accelerators. We're growth hacking accelerators by running MOX. And MOX is a different type of accelerator. We work with companies of all stages, and we solve user acquisition and for localization. So we help the companies through our program localize for markets like Indonesia, Malaysia, and India, because they are different markets. And then we solve one very important problem, which is user acquisition. We give free user acquisition to our 160 million smartphone users on the MOX platform. We have our own Android smartphone platform. In return for revenue share, we invest, and we also take equity. So we took the Shanghai kind of smartphone model, where the hardware is almost free and you make money on that ecosystem, into the rest of the world. And we're offering this up as an open platform to try and offset the increasing monopoly positions that you see companies like Google, Facebook, and some of the Chinese players start to take up, not in the US and Western Europe, but definitely in Eastern Europe, South America, South Asia, like India, and Southeast Asia.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that, William. And based on my understanding, both Chinaccelerator and MOX do have an emphasis or focus on cross-border entrepreneurship. Could you speak to that?
Sure. So most entrepreneurs are not lucky enough to be born in the US or China. So China, the U.S. is the largest market. China is the second largest market. U.S. is the largest developed market, largest digital market, whereas China is the largest mobile-first, mobile-only market. They're both very, very competitive, and they have large home markets. But there are awesome entrepreneurs making really, really cool stuff in other countries. Unfortunately, their home markets are not large enough to support a global, like an interesting business, a business that's interesting enough to get VC funding. For startups, startups are about solving problems, and we're early stage startup investors. So SOSV and through our 7 accelerators, our focus is to solve a problem or solve problems for those startups, and that's why we're vertically focused. So the problem that we solve is helping companies go global, maybe not from year one, but to go global from not from day one, but to year one. They get product market fit, they get users, they get revenue, they get people that love them in one country, and our role is to take them cross-border. So we help startups from all around the world enter China with Chinaccelerator. We're helping Chinese companies from early stage startups to Sequoia-backed companies with 30 million users in China come out of China. And with MOX, we're focused on Southeast Asia and India, helping companies from around the world tap into these markets where there's, this is where the future is. There's 1 billion users on mobile. The next 1 billion users will be in these markets, and we call it the last 4 billion. So that's where we see the opportunity over the next 20 years, getting these users who don't make $10,000, $15,000 a year. They're closer to the 5,000 to 8,000. But this is where the growth is. They have different needs. They have different requirements than an American user or even a Chinese user, and that's the focus for MOX. So we're helping companies go cross-border.
Right. Thanks for that, William. So you mentioned cross-border, so primarily, abroad to China and China abroad. And we can talk about both. They're both very large trends. So back in the day, it used to be, U.S. to China, or a lot of big companies come to China, or tech companies try to enter China. Obviously, we've seen a lot of difficulties there. So companies like Facebook and Google can't even enter. Google was here for a while, but eventually was shut down. But a lot of social networks can't enter China. A lot of other companies, even like Uber, Groupon, eBay, they had some level of success, but ultimately acquiesced to the local competitors. So it seems very difficult. So can you speak to the experiences of some of your early stage companies going from abroad entering China?
Sure. I mean, just to be clear, Google didn't get shut down. Google left. And how they're trying to come back is a little hard. But the reason why most international companies fail in China is not because of the government. It's because they have poor execution. They try and take a product that was built for another market and jam it down the throats of Chinese business and consumer users, and it doesn't work. They also try and remote control the China business from another market. Because, hey, I'm in Mountain View, and I took this product to Europe, and it worked there. I took this product to Southeast Asia, it worked there. So I should be able to take it to China, and it should work here. Unfortunately, that doesn't prove out to be the case. China is a different market, different user requirements, different infrastructure. and you have to take a different approach. So I think most of the companies learned their lesson. LinkedIn created what's now known as the LinkedIn model, where you have a local company with local on-the-ground command and control, different shareholder set, and a different technology and product set. Now, LinkedIn China does not share code with LinkedIn Global. This works somewhat, maybe not so much for LinkedIn, because business social networks are not really appropriate for China. I should know I invested in 2 startups trying to solve this problem before LinkedIn came to China. They both failed. But what we do with startups is we take startups from around the world, and even corporates, companies that are already public, and what we do is a startup within a startup, or a startup within a corporate. So very lean, not spending a lot of money, come in with a very small team, or even just one person, and building a small local team around them, and try and get product market fit for a product for China. So we take this special sauce, the unfair advantage that this company might have internationally, and we get rid of everything else, and we try and apply that unfair advantage, that special sauce, to a specifically Chinese problem. So 99% of the companies around the world, the problem that they're trying to solve is not necessarily a Chinese problem. So first you need to have a Chinese problem, and then an international solution that can be applied to it. So the sectors that we often focus on are education, where Chinese consumers love international education. They think it's a lot better than Chinese education. We can play upon that prejudice there. We focus on fintech, with the exception of P2P. Chinese fintech is a bit behind global fintech, and we're including crypto in there. There's where global and China crypto are, I wouldn't say neck and neck, but pretty well developed on both sides. We look at cross-border commerce, where international brands might not be as trusting of a Chinese partner. So a cross-border company that has local roots but international point of view can have an unfair advantage. We focus on health. A lot of people in health, and this is including food and nutrition, where people in China are increasingly concerned about food and health. 90% of the water in China is polluted. So where's your food coming from? We can play upon this. And so, yeah, it's been a fun, wild ride. I think the last time we had a company with an app was a year and a half ago, operating in China, let alone a website. So operating in China is a bit different. We're helping international companies leverage local resources and local practices to try and build a business at the early stage. Once you get that foothold in there, then it's time to bring in top local and international, but especially local VCs to help them get to the next level. But in the early stage, from 0 to 1, that's where we come in.
Okay. And are you able to give us a specific example of such a company?
Okay, I mean, there's a lot of them. I'd say, I'll give you one example. We had 3 young women from Singapore. They'd launched a fashion app selling, women's clothing over apps. And they were top 5 fashion app in 3 Southeast Asian countries. But the e-commerce is still on the come, and most people are not buying $100 sweaters on apps. So they wanted to come to China. We actually rejected them. It's a company called Fashery. We rejected them the first time, but they were very persistent, and we ended up investing in them and inviting them to join the next batch. So their unfair advantage was that they had exclusive relationships with independent fashion designers in a lot of countries around Asia, Australia, Indonesia, Korea. And they came to China. They had never worked here in China, but they spoke Chinese, but they had no local knowledge. And our program is 12 weeks, and it's focused on tests. We just run lots and lots and lots of tests, trying things out. And around week 8, when we launched, we got a hit on some of the content that we were doing, and we were able to drive them weekly sales from 0 to $36,000 a week. With 0 marketing spent. Now, how did we end up doing that? Well, when you're early stage, you have to growth hack. You have to try things that might not be necessarily scalable and repeatable. For this company, what we discovered is a lot of these fashion designers are really close friends with a lot of people in media and television, and they hang out together, especially the Koreans. And now these Korean TV producers make dramas, and these dramas are extremely popular in China. And it just so happens that the drama people don't have a lot of money, so they tend to put the clothes from their fashion designer friends on the stars in the shows. So we ended up mapping which star was wearing which piece of clothing from which designer on which episode, and ended up doing content around that. And then we had to find out where those fans of those shows hung out, and it turns out that they're very willing to buy the clothes that are being worn by their favorite stars. Now in China, we have Wang Hong, we have KOL, and you have to pay the KOL to wear the sweater. But in this case, the star was already very popular and already wearing the sweater. So we could leverage the power of influencers, key opinion leaders, KOLs, these internet celebrities, without having to actually pay for them. And that drove hundreds of purchases per day for these sweaters and skirts and other fashion items. And the key thing for China is we're the only player in China to be able to offer that. The one thing that's in very big demand in China is unique fashion sense, and having a exclusive relationship with a particular brand or for a particular product, because it's a very, very competitive market.
Yeah, right. That's a really good example, William, and a really smart way of hacking that resource. So we talked about going from abroad to China, but let's also talk a little bit more about China abroad, or China going to other markets, because it's increasingly the case where some of these Chinese companies are developing core capabilities and also very innovative business models that you don't even see in other countries. So can you talk a little bit more about what's happening on that side?
Sure. So the one thing that a lot of people in the US and Western Europe don't understand is that China's already gone abroad. The cat's out of the bag, so to speak. If you look at Russia, 6 of the top 10 highest grossing apps in Russia are Chinese. India, either directly or through their investments, 3 to 4 of the top 10 mobile players in India are Chinese. Brazil is 4 out of the top 3 to 4 out of the top 10 are Chinese players. So instead of going to the US or Western Europe, where a Chinese product might not necessarily solve an American problem. China's the largest mobile first, mobile only market in the world. You've got people here whose first experience is on mobile, so their user requirements, the user experience that they expect is different. So that they're not necessarily going to go to the US and Western Europe first. What most Chinese companies have gone are into the other mobile first, mobile only markets, where the user requirement is a bit more similar to China. Also, there's a lot less competition, and the capital that the Chinese startups and the Chinese companies can bring to bear can be put to use. Most companies in China are used to using money as a weapon in terms of marketing, and they've driven up mobile advertising prices so much in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia that local players can't compete. They cannot buy users, and that's made it an interesting state of affairs where you've got international players dominating in Southeast Asia, South Asia, and increasingly in South America. And there's a knockout, drag-down war going on in Eastern Europe and Russia right now.
Yeah. So that's for some of the developing markets, or even some of the developed markets as well. But at least for folks in the U.S., we don't hear too much about Chinese companies entering and selling their products there. For example, Xiaomi is doing very well in China, and in India in particular as a global market. It hasn't quite entered the U.S. just yet. And I know Huawei is trying to enter the U.S., doing relatively well in Europe. Can you talk a little bit more about some of these more established Chinese technology companies and how they might enter the U.S. market eventually?
So I think it was Mao who I'm not a history major, but who said, you conquer the countryside before you hit the city. So I think that what you'll see is the likes of Amazon and Facebook and Google have Western Europe. They have the developed markets, and the Chinese are already dominating the more developing markets, so the mobile first, mobile only markets. And at some point, they're going to start bumping into each other, and it's going to be very, very interesting to watch. I think you're going to see a lot of carnage happen, and I think you'll have the international companies like Amazon and Facebook and Google. They're struggling in the emerging markets. Amazon is trying to re-enter India right now. You've also see companies like Tencent and Alibaba and Xiaomi have a difficult time in the U.S. markets because it would require a very significant change to the products, to the business models, and to the market approach. Consumers do not like to be sold at so much in the U.S. They're not willing to take massive discounts in order to give up all their data and spam all their friends. In India, you can, and we've been pretty successful in doing it in Southeast Asia and India. A lot of the marketing techniques, a lot of the product layout that works in China works in Southeast Asia. In the U.S., you're going to have to localize, and that's not happening right now. Who's going to do it first? Well, hardware, obviously. A drone is a drone is a drone. So you're seeing a lot of hardware. Where China is very, very strong is consumer apps. So some of the consumer apps are starting to creep into the U.S., but they're very good at disguising themselves. So the apps that you're using, they're all on your phone. You do not know that they're Chinese. It's not just companies like Musical.ly who are doing a cool karaoke video app, but it's also a lot of the utilities that are on the phones. A lot of the you've got Meitu, the photo apps and things like that. You're going to see a lot of those consumer apps come in. You're just not going to know that they're Chinese.
Right. So we see this playing out in the real world with different nations mongering for geopolitical influence. But it's also playing out in the technology world, which is really interesting. So it should be a very exciting couple of years and future decade in tech. And let's see how things go. William, thanks so much for joining us and for your time.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
No worries at all. Cheers.